if you don't have motivation, you cannot achieve some amazing things that require long-term commitment, but also you'll just have a rubbish time along the way. And so I look at motivation in two camps. The first one is long-term motivation. Like, how do you actually keep going no matter what throughout a 3-year project? How do you stop those little voices in your head saying, oh, that'll be tough, or let's have today off? And then how do you sort of translate that to short-term motivation, which is my other kind of thought process around motivation, where, you know, every single day you have to sit down and execute, or you just have to do something every single day. How do you actually sort of get over the mental hurdles and the habit formation hurdles, which means that you'll be able to execute every single day to reach your long-term goals? And in this video, I'm going to share with you all of the tips, all of the tools that I've used over the last probably 5 to 7 years to actually get to where I want to be. And it's surprisingly simple. As long as you kind of have a little bit of self-discipline in the early days, after that, everything seems to flow, and we'll talk about that next. This video is brought to you by my newsletter. Go check it out at andrewstapleton.com.au/newsletter. The first thing you'll get, which will really help with the motivation, is a daily planner. It talks about breaking up your day into deep work activities for an hour and a half. That has been invaluable for getting me to where I am with my businesses and through my PhD. So go check it out. You'll get that within just a couple of minutes of signing up to the newsletter. And then you'll also find out about other little secret things I've got going on, and you'll be the first to find out if you sign up. So go check it out. So the first thing I want to talk about is long-term motivation. Now, I'm talking about projects that you need to be focused on and motivated to contribute towards over multiple years. You know, it could be a PhD, which is like up to 7 years in the US, 3 to 7 years. It could be a project like a new business. It could be a blog you're working on. It could be that you're just working on something for yourself, like meditating every day or whatever. So a long-term goal needs to be supported by the kind of foundational habits. It needs to kind of make you want to do something every single day, but it can be really hard. And these long-term habits then filter down into your daily habits, and it just makes everything a little bit easier. So the first thing I want to talk about is the X effect. The X effect is something that I personally used throughout my PhD and also throughout other sort of projects like coding, building my businesses, learning to read every single day and enjoying the process of reading. And what the X effect is, it's a series of grids. It's like a 10 by 5, so it's 50 days. And what you do is you simply mark an X every single day where you do that thing you want to do. So there's a few important rules. The first thing is that you need to understand why you want to do this thing. So if you're doing your PhD, you know, you say, well, I'm going to write every day. I'm going to sit down for an hour and write on my thesis. Or if you're in the experimental section, you could say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do my experiments, or I'm going to do my research for at least an hour and a half, or I'm going to do that twice a day. Now, the thing about the X effect is that it just keeps you accountable and also gives you that little bit of motivation. As you see, little tiny X's appear in the boxes over 50 days. And then the idea is that at the end of those 50 days, you've kind of developed the habit, which means that it kind of feels weird to break it. And I certainly felt that while I was learning to code, is that I would do a little bit of learning every single day. And as long as I spent at least sort of like half an hour doing a coding problem, I just felt like at the end of that, I was like, oh, I kind of want to go open up, and I built that habit. I also did it to learn to read every single day, and I also did it for meditation as well. Now, the one thing that I did find about this is that it needed to be a physical block of squares. Now, I first started doing this when it was online. I had a Google Sheets, and I simply had the date across the top, and then I would put a little X when I did it for that day, and it felt great. But the problem is because it was online, I just didn't keep it updated, and it wasn't in my face all the time. So what I highly recommend you do is you either get an app on your phone, and there's a habit hacker app, which I tried, but I didn't really like. Once again, it was kind of that electrical or the app kind of screen interface just didn't really motivate me. But what I did find is that I carry around with me every single day a little tiny bit of paper that's folded up, and you can produce this for yourself on a site called pocketmod.com, I think it is, but type in Pocket Mod to Google and you'll find it. And I also carry with me every single day, I've got my everyday carry, I've got myself a pen. And so I find having this folded up in my wallet really helps. And then having a pen on me all the time. This is the Tech pen, like Tech, TEC keychain pen. But I find that having this on me all the time just really helps me sort of just stay focused, and it allows me to kind of get away from the screen. And the physical act of putting an X in the boxes with a pen really helps kind of motivate and solidify that habit. So yes, the X effect. If you want to create a habit, try that. A big motivator for me is knowing I will die. Have you ever wondered what this is up here? Well, that is a remember you will die graph. Now that goes from my birth at the top all the way down to the age of 80, and each single dot in that grid is 1 week of my life. And I got this from essentially Stoicism. Like, I did a lot of Stoic readings about sort of 2 years ago, and this was really motivating long term. Just remembering that you'll die and seeing your life, you know, like on a board every single day. And on Friday, I put an extra little dot to show that another week of my life has gone. And that kind of helps keep me motivated. It's really weird. It's like, I'm not scared that I will like run out of time. It's just like, okay, that's how much time I've had. This is how much time I've got left. I just need to do this project for like one of these lines or two of these lines. And then I've got this all the rest of this time. So absolutely having this stoic kind of remember you will die, or I think it's memento mori, that has really helped me in the long run. And some of my friends say it's really morbid, and my partner doesn't really understand it, I don't think. But it's really helpful for me. So I'll put a link to that one in the description, so you can just download your own copy, print it off, and just put in little dots every week of your life. And that kind of helps me with my long-term motivation. It helps me zoom out from the issue that I'm facing right now and go, I've got all of this time, all of this space. Yeah, and also it would be a little bit of a shame if I wasted this week not doing these things. A really important long-term motivator for me is making sure that I'm measuring the right thing. Now that means that sometimes I can measure stuff that really deflates me and causes me to kind of doubt myself, which completely kills motivation. So what I recommend you do is when you start on a big project, actually control or actually measure the things that you can control. So for example, if you're writing your PhD thesis, the thing that you can control is how many words you write a day. And so that's what I would measure. So for example, at the moment, I'm growing 2 websites, and the only thing that makes it grow are words. And so I measure not like the amount of money they're bringing in or anything like that. The only thing I can control really is how much content are on those websites. And so what I recommend you do if you're doing your thesis, if you're in the early stages and you need to produce results, is that's the thing you should measure. And there's 2 ways that I like to track it. First of all, I just like to have a little spreadsheet with like my progress and say, okay, I've written this many words, and then I watch that word count increase. And you can do the same for your thesis, or if you're studying, you could say, I'm going to spend at least an hour or 2 hours doing study, and you can see those hours accumulate, which is excellent. And the second way that I do it is I get 2 jars and I work out how many things I want to achieve. So for example, if I'm writing my thesis and I want to write 200 pages, I'll put 200 beans or paper clips in one jar. And each time that I get to the point where I produce a page, I move one paper clip across and dump it in the other one. And that physical kind of visual reminder helps keep me motivated. So it comes in 2 packages. First of all, remember what you can actually control. measure that thing to use it as motivation and use a visual feedback or a number that you can track to actually improve that motivation over the long run. And that has been super valuable. So yes, including that into your kind of motivational tool set, I think is probably one of the most powerful things that I've done. And yes, remember that some things that you can measure, you can control, that will completely destroy your motivation. So for me, something you can control, measure it, make it visual. Done. Long-term motivation for me also means learning to control the negative thoughts in my head that pop up all the bloody time. Like, it's that ego, it's that self-protection mechanism in my mind, which is always bubbling up and going, oh, you should stop doing this, or this is silly, you're wasting your time, or oh, how about we just relax at the moment, or you've only got an hour, there's nothing you could do in that hour before your next meeting and before your next thing, so let's just hang out. Like, all of those voices are really detrimental to motivation. They just stop you, and then once you kind of start listening to them, once you start kind of confusing their opinion with reality, that's when you can kind of get into this spiral, death spiral of negativity and like, oh, I can't do these things. So learning to control your internal monologue has been something which has been invaluable for all of my long-term motivational projects. I've learned how to control that internal monologue with meditation. And I started just with a free app called Insight Timer, and I slowly increased the time that I was meditating every single day. And it started with just 5 minutes, then it went to 10 minutes, and at the moment I'm kind of trying to push myself a little bit for the next 30 days, where I'll be doing all of the same motivational tips and tools that I've just shown you for myself for meditation. And I will be trying to do about 45 minutes to an hour every single day for the next 30 days. That's my mission. And what meditation does is it essentially just allows me to exercise the ability to bring my focus back to something. Like, I don't let my mind run away with me into all these negative thoughts. And once you've kind of controlled your mind in a certain way, and you've kind of exercised that willpower, and you bring the focus back to your breath, like, it's amazing. It's incredibly simple, but not listening to that internal monologue and learning to control it really does help. So I'd highly recommend that if you don't have some sort of meditation practice at the moment, that you go get Insight Timer. I currently use the Headspace app, but I've also used Calm, and they've all been fantastic. So those are all of the things I do to keep myself motivated over the long run. Once you've kind of laid the foundations of your long-term motivational kind of toolbox, I guess, then you have to work on translating the power that gives you into daily or, regular motivation. And so I know what I'm like. I just listen to the voices sometimes, or I go, oh, let's not do this now, or this is a waste of time. Like, all of those weird voices that just pop up. Like, I do have to push through them sometimes. And it's not always that I feel great while doing work. Like, sometimes I do just have to plow on through, but my goal is just to finish and realize that the next day is a different day and I'll feel better and it will be different. It's not that everything's rubbish and I'll hate it forever, but sometimes a little bit of self-discipline can go a long way. And these are the sort of 3 things that I've learned to control and adapt to keep my short-term motivation as high as possible. And the first thing is, if I really don't feel like doing something, I'll just say to myself, I'm just going to do 10 minutes. Because I find that a lot of the things stopping me doing something, like performing a task, are actually the early stages, like turning on the computer, opening up the software, going to the thing, grabbing the whatever, like getting my thoughts onto a piece of paper. I'll just say, I'm going to do 10 minutes. And what I find a lot of the time is that just tricking myself into doing 10 minutes means that I end up doing much, much more, like half an hour to an hour, because I get into something. But there's a little bit of an activation energy, a little bit of a hump you need to get over. And by saying, I'm just going to do it for 10 minutes, you've kind of got over the worst components of the activity that you want to do. So that's one trick, is I'll say to myself, I'm just going to do 10 minutes, and by the time I've opened everything up, grabbed the resources I need, I actually feel like doing the thing that I didn't want to do. So one thing that I've been doing is working with my own body and my own sort of like circadian rhythms and my motivation levels. Now yours is going to be completely different to mine, but I find first thing in the morning is where I produce the best work, the best outputs that I can achieve. And so I put a lot of very important tasks first thing in the morning. When I first sit at the computer, I don't look at emails because that's a task that is draining. I don't look at admin stuff. I just do the task. Now after lunch at about 2, I can still focus a little bit, but what I don't do is put something that's highly important and relies on a lot of concentration after lunch, because I'm a little bit more tired, I've used up a little bit more energy. So I'll tend to sort of structure my day with high impact, sort of high input in the morning, and then medium impact with not so much of effort required in the afternoon, and then right at the very end of the day I'll do that kind of mind-numbing, no effort but boring stuff like reply to emails, get on top of my own personal admin, all of that stuff. And I do find this is one thing, is that if I am excited, I will jump on that thing almost immediately. And so I try not to let myself jump from thing to thing, but if I just have this overwhelming urge to do a certain thing, write an article, produce a certain video, I will just do it, because I think you do have to capture those moments of motivation and excitement throughout a long-term project. So like I said, don't bounce all the time, but if you do have just this spark of inspiration like I get sort of every couple of weeks, just jump on it. There's no harm, and you can add that to your kind of tally list of activities, and it just feels great because you're doing something you want to do, you're motivated to do it, and breaking a little bit of a rigid routine to actually do something that you like is really great. Another short-term thing that I have learned is that using caffeine and sugar doesn't really work. Like, it does work a little bit. Now, when I was writing my master's thesis, I sat in the library with 2 massive energy drinks and a chicken sandwich. That's what fueled my master's thesis. But one thing I've learned in sort of like the many years of doing my PhD and postdoc and now growing some businesses is that I cannot function during a sugar crash or a caffeine crash. So I'm actually, I stopped drinking caffeine about a year ago, and I feel brilliant. And I've just started sort of minimizing my sugar intake, because I was doing this. I would like sit down and be like, oh, I don't feel motivated. And then I'd sit down and go, oh, I'll have a little cheeky biscuit, or I'll have a little bit of sugar. And I'd smash it into my face, and I'd be like, boom, and I'd get that kind of weird sort of buzz energy from the sugar and the caffeine. I'd be like, I'm ready to go. And I'd go, and then it's not sustainable. So after about half an hour to 45 minutes, I start crashing. And then the last half an hour of me trying to do my work is absolute torture. I'm like mashing at the keyboard and not really enjoying it. So I find that keeping myself level is much better than having this weird sugar caffeine spike and then crashing down the other side. So I drink some peppermint tea. I do some lemongrass and ginger tea instead of caffeine. And the habits that I've built just means that when I sit down at my computer, I'm ready to work. And I know that, I'm going to have to go sort of persevere through the first 10 minutes, but making sure that I don't have those artificially kind of doped responses throughout my output is very important. And I found that some days I do sort of don't have the highest motivation, but I manage to get through. Whereas if I have those days and I have a sugar crash, I just give up. So no sugar, no caffeine. It's boring from a 36-year-old, but it does really work. Keep your motivation kind of much more level and consistent on long-term projects. So there we are. There are all of the things that you need to know about keeping yourself motivated through long-term projects, and then how that translates to short-term stuff so that you can just make sure that you are as motivated as possible. And there's one thing I didn't put in here, which is very important, which is it does rely on taking some time off. Like, work with your body. If you do just need a couple of days, have a couple of days. In a long-term project, just having a weekend off or a week off or 2 weeks off really won't matter if when you get back into it, it will give you that kind of extra boost you need. So yeah, there's everything I've learned about keeping myself as motivated as possible. Your systems and structures are going to be different because you're a different person and you're going to have to work out what works for you. But ultimately, that is what worked for me. I feel like I'm getting more done than ever before, and I enjoy the process, importantly. And I think that's what really motivation is all about, is about getting to an end goal, but also being okay with the process and being able to execute every day. Some days it's harder than others, but ultimately keeping that motivation high will mean that you'll be able to achieve a lot more in a shorter period of time, and you'll just be much happier as well.